switch. Goes right back to neutral. That means off. This is a reverse. That reverse is a latch. So then I want to turn it into a forward gear. Now it's in forward. I'm sorry, reverse. Yeah. If I turn it off, it's going to stay in reverse until I take the switch off, and then now I'm back in the forward gear. That's actually pumping concrete out. This is a cooling fan. Yep. So then you have your 3 gauges. You'd have your E-stop, and then you have your 2. These are inert now because you have your main display. All your engine parameters are going to set through the head display. Correct. This would be for an alternative default. So if you see these lights, that means they failed altogether. Here they would be a secondary.
Okay.
So then you got local panel, neutral, none of the panel works, and then you're in the remote function all the way.
So remote is all the way out.
All the way over, correct. You got low volume of engine, and then high volume, like what you see me do. So you accumulator and main pressure, volume control, that slows the pistons down. So in percentage wise, it's a remote access to the, a remote regulator to the main drive pump. So in percentage wise, if you screw it all the way in, you would tell the pump, I want it at 0 pressure. 1 is 10%, 2, 3, 4, so on. And then you get to 100%, screw it all the way out. So it's like a water faucet. You screw it in, slow the volume down to nothing, screw it all the way out, speed it up, like water. You got on your main filter, you've got a gauge, a sight gauge per se. It works on vacuum, but it tells you, now this would be at the end of the day at idle, you'd read this. In the morning, you'll read red because the oil's cold and it's trying to suck harder. So it's a little bit false. This is at the end of the day, before you leave the job site. Main hydraulic pressure in oil here. We're using an AW46. That's an anywhere 46. So in theory, it gives you $4,600 of the oil. If you clean it every 250 yards, you'll probably get the $4,000 out of it. So you have a manual sight gauge here. You got high and low, and then you've got a temperature gauge. Let you know. This temperature gauge here is not applicable. It's all your display. Any questions so far? No. So there's a few functions on engine. Now you have your cap and you've got your dipstick, and we're using a 10W30 synthetic for diesel. You can use whatever you want, but that's what the manufacturer calls for. So anything else that you've been thinking of that we start moving on forward? Now there's a protocol for if you lost all power. Because, well, I mean, I'll go ahead first.
That is waterproof or not? This one?
That display, correct, it is. Waterproof, correct.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, so the inner workings of the system. I'm going to give you a lot of information. You're not going to really retain it first. Let me give you a key here. Let me put it on. So everybody's got a different way of skinning the cat. So the idea on a concrete pump, this is the basis for all concrete pumps, and this is what people spend billions of dollars for. Have you seen a boom truck before on concrete? So you see the hose up there, boom, every time it shifts, boom, and it's rocking and rocking and rocking. He's got to slow down to keep it from rocking. You speed it up and put more ground yards per hour on the ground, you've got a hell of a pump, right? Well, that's the idea. So the consensus is, if that piston goes down, and when it stops, there's the jerk. It's got to switch over and then now square back. Now, if I can make that piston just before it stops and switch over, the two will meet. You don't get that bubble. Okay, so that's the theory on all concrete pumps. So Boots does it electronically. So you'll see 1, 2, see the proximity switches here for the wires? So that's changing a digital signal into an analog signal. And that's what your TK50 does here, these two. So when I turn the switch on, and I turn the pump on in the forward gear, you're going to see this light sweat. So I'm emulating what the proximity switches are doing. So that's all that's doing. So that's one of the things, in 3 or less questions when you call me, I can figure it out, because that splits the system in half. Well, Harold, every time it goes down once, it stops, and I got to hit the interrupt button and it comes back. Well, okay, tell me what the lights are doing. Well, K238, I don't see a light at all come on when it comes down. Well, okay, then I know it's electrical. We move that way. I see the light come on, but it doesn't switch. Well, I know it's hydraulic. We move the other way. So it comes to switch the system on. Now, there actually is a third proximity switch. You see it all the way in the back, and that's autocorrect. It's kind of hard to get into that, only because that generates your loop oil. So if you were pumping something thin, water, sand, a little bit of rock and water, there's a forward reversing valve that adds oil. Well, it's going to add too much. So every fifth stroke, when it comes down, it's checking for that autocorrect switch. So every once in a while, you'll hear the machine bog down for a second. It's correcting itself. It's taking oil away, or it's adding to it. So that's what that autocorrect. I won't really get into the schematics of it, but it's kind of hard to understand. But that ultimately, that's what it does.
And that one is different than the other two. If I'm gonna get a.
So every stroke, it sees one of them.
No,
boom, boom.
yeah, no, I mean, but the sensor is different, or is the same sensor? I mean, the same kind of sensor for all three.
The same kind of sensor. Okay. Yeah. Every fifth stroke, you're seeing that sensor. So in theory, I think I know what you're thinking. You could switch them. You really can't, because you'll move the problem from one to the other.
No. Like if I'm gonna get a spare, to have a spare sensor with me, just in case I need it sometime.
That would be the correct way. Yes. You can't really. Now, you can move sensors around to see if the problem moves with you, then you know for sure it's the sensor. That's a good way of doing it. But you can't move the problem and then leave it there, because the autocorrect, every fifth stroke, it looks for it. If that would go out, you'd call me up and say, every 5 strokes it stops. Well, then I know it's the autocorrect system. Either connector, the sensor, or or the K238 static. There's actually a proximity switch here. So when you think about it, it runs through the filter box, which is the e-stop relay. It runs through the this changes an analog to a digital signal. It's called a POF card, and that's your green POF. And then from there, it runs through the, see where it says K238.1, and then without the point, so one's running your switchover and one's running your rods. So it knows when that rod is this, that sensor should be on that side. That means it's going to orient the hole. So if you call me and say, listen, the pumps, the pistons are moving, but the rock isn't, well then we know it's a K238.1 for sure. Either the card has gone bad, or the wiring has gone bad, or the servo has gone bad. Pretty easy. Then we go from there. Okay. So that's all that does, is a POF. So your first line of defense is if you come over here and look at the POF, you're going to see lights come on. See the 5? The 5 is energized. When I turn it on, you're going to see in the switch. See them isolate? 6 and 7. That means every time that sensor hit, it's going to flash. So we can put that in real time. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Turn it up. Okay, real time. You can see the flash. Every time that hits the sensor, you see it goes off. Power's good, and the switch is tapping. Power's good, so the light